Well, there could be another dark chapter to the war in the Middle East, and that's to do with humankind's most basic need, water. Iran, which has been suffering severe water shortages, has accused the US of striking one of its desalination plants. Tehran is now threatening to strike the Gulf's water infrastructure if the US hits its energy facilities. So is water another frontier in this war? Kaveh Madani is director of the United Nations University's Institute for Water, Environment and Health and a former deputy head of Iran's Environment Department. Kaveh, good to have you with us once again. Now, the last time we spoke to you, Iran's drought made the headlines, a situation that you also described as water bankruptcy. What is the state of Iran's water supply at the moment, and has it worsened with this conflict?
So right now is winter in Iran. Actually, now we're a few days into spring, and winter is the peak precipitation season, and spring is quite wet. So the situation is much better than the last time we spoke, when for example, Tehran was very close to its day zero with reservoirs being completely empty. The situation is better and more resilient at the moment. There has not been any interruptions in water supply so far, and in most of the country except for one location in Qeshm Island in the Persian Gulf, where one of the desalination plants has been damaged, and which resulted in water outage for 30 villages there. Other than that, there is no report of any incident in the recent war, except in the past war we also saw one water facility, one distribution network being impacted in North Tehran. But so far the situation is, I think, okay.
Yeah, given that strike on the desalination plant you've just spoken about, is this a new sort of battlefront, a strategy that the US, you think, could be considering, possibly crippling Iran's water supply?
I hope not, because this would be a war crime. Let's not forget that the whole war started with the violation of international law, but targeting civilian infrastructure is a violation of international humanitarian law. Even wars have rules to follow and respect. So far, I think in most cases, there have been a few incidents of attacks on public, I would say, infrastructure, including energy infrastructure and water infrastructure. But other than that, there is no evidence of deliberate targeting of the infrastructure, except for the tweet by President Trump a few days ago, and the threat of attacking Iran's major power plants that could have also impacted water operations, because once there is no electricity, the pumps stop working, treatment plants stop working, and water distribution systems fail. But we know that as of yesterday, the plan has changed, and the President Trump is not going to attack, or at least U.S. backed off on that plan. But in response to that, as you mentioned, Iran threatened to target the water and energy infrastructure in the region, knowing that the other parties to the conflict are much more vulnerable when it comes to water infrastructure. This is because Iran's geography. Iran is pretty big, and it's the richest country when it comes to water availability among the parties of this conflict. Although Iran has had water shortages, but still, in terms of access to water, it has much more water than the other parties.
Yes, and given that and how unpredictable this conflict is, despite what Donald Trump had said over the past 24 hours, is Iran prepared? You've worked in the Iranian Environment Department. Do you think it is prepared to follow through on its threats if it's targeted by itself to target desalination facilities across the Gulf, across countries that depend on it so highly?
I mean, I don't work for the Iranian government and or the Revolutionary Guards of Iran, so I don't know what their plans are. But I would say, in terms of vulnerability, the other countries are much more vulnerable. The 33% of the whole world's desalination capacity is in the GCC. Some of the states, the smaller states, heavily rely on on desalination plants for drinking water. They only have a few days of, or in the best cases, weeks of water, reserves left. If a desalination plant, a major desalination plant is attacked, those countries would extremely struggle. And I think that was the kind of the retaliation threat to an extent worked. Because everyone knows what the consequences of that would be. I mean, I think Iranians have shown that they are willing to retaliate after the attack on Iran's Kashmir Island facility, the desalination plant. There was an explosion reported or damage reported to a desalination plant in Bahrain. So there has been a tit for tat strategy there to an extent, working or at least preventing all parties, fortunately, to attack what would hurt the civilians who have no agency in this war. I want this conflict to end very soon with peace going back to that country and to the region and freedom emerging out of it. But I mean, so far we are seeing that the civilians are paying the price.
Yes, is there precedence to this? The issue of possibly one country over the other, targeting the other's water supply, targeting water infrastructure. Has this happened before, given how precarious, as you mentioned, water supply is in the region?
We have seen it in previously, unfortunately, during the Gulf War, and then later on there was an incident in Yemen, involving Yemen. So we have seen these incidents in the past, but never at this scale. And GC the countries like UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait that are heavily relying on this, at least for the last few decades, they have been in a good shape. So we have never seen threats of this scale. And people now talk about desalination facilities, but let's not forget, as I mentioned, even if you attack the energy infrastructure, water infrastructure would fail, because if there is no electricity, water systems would not function. And you don't always have to attack a desalination plant. You can also attack a treatment facility or a pumping station or a distribution system. So those are possible. And then with the oil tankers being burnt and all the things, the pollution that is being added to the Persian Gulf, the intake of these facilities can also be impacted and compromised. So all those things are there. They're real risk, and it encourages everyone to reconsider, the resilience and reliability of these infrastructure in the long run. But at the moment, we are in an episode that is unprecedented, something of this scale involving so many parties in it, and all we can hope for is that the parties would respect the international law and stop this retaliation and escalation exercise that is not serving anyone. And as we know, it's not only hurting them locally and regionally, but also the rest of the world.
And just to get some perspective from within Iran, I mean, Kaveh, you've won the Stockholm Water Prize, a very prestigious prize for your work on water management. But yet you've been accused by Iran of being a Western or a Mossad spy trying to sabotage Iran's agriculture and even branded a water terrorist. What's your response to such accusations?
I mean, I think that the history speaks for itself, right? I mean, I meant it well. I was concerned about the future of that country. As you mentioned at the beginning of this interview, a few months ago, we reached that stage that I had warned about, and I was not the only academic or scientist who spoke about that. We know that water is a matter of national security. You can have missiles, you can have drones, and those would help you to fight and protect your national security to an extent. But they have to also understand, all nations have to understand that water is also a pillar of national security, no matter where you are in the world. And it's sad that those things happen. I hope they have learned from history, and I hope there would be better action after all of this.
And to remember that it is the most basic of human rights. Kaveh Madani, really appreciate your insights there. Thank you so much.
Thank you.